Welcome to Just Business. This week on the show, in business, we put a lot of energy into discovering and protecting our ideas. But can you really own an idea? Then, how do you deal with self doubt as an entrepreneur? And finally, how do you get people to trust a sketchy new website that you just launched in an hour? Henry, my dad is notorious for having people steal his ideas, which
Mm,
means he
okay.
comes up with ideas that he thinks would be good companies and then realizes that there's already been a company in business for 15 years that is
Yeah.
doing this. Have you ever felt that way? You felt this ownership over this unique thing that you feel like you plucked out of the air and then just to have it stolen away from you by someone 15 years ago?
Yeah, of course. It's not a great feeling, you have a dream and then you realize my dream is a reality, but I'm not in it. You feel like you were robbed, but really you were never in the picture. Yeah, the idea of ideas
Mm,
and the ownership of them, it feels like we have such a personal relationship to our ideas and our solutions and how we view the world, but when we then put it into a commercial market, oftentimes that ownership never
yeah,
was, and it can be difficult to protect even when you did get there first. So it's a really great
yeah.
topic.
How do you so honestly, this has happened so much in my life. It's like a constant running joke between me and my dad. The thing that I always said to him in some ways to encourage, but is me just parroting smarter people, um, is that and we hear this a lot of in entrepreneurship that an idea isn't everything, execution is everything. Or as an
Yes.
idea isn't anything, execution is everything. That's really the quote. So how do we tie that in to this idea of protection and harboring over ideas? Like so often we're told at the early stages of our company not to be afraid to tell people our ideas. Like that's a usually gut reaction is you're worried someone's going to steal your thing, run away with it, and build a company without you, as you were just saying. But so often that's not the case. So often with potentially really good ideas and also probably pretty bad ideas. If you told somebody your idea, they wouldn't understand it at all. And so
Sure. Yeah.
it's helpful actually for you to get that early feedback. So how do we tie these two things together that it's good for us to share our ideas, right? And that our ideas are basically nothing. And also this concept that we have in our business landscape that ideas and ownership over them is important.
I'm an ideas guy, so I don't love to be told my ideas are nothing, but
That's
in
that
many
non-technical
places they
founder
are.
syndrome.
Yes. Which is a horrible disease. Please consult your doctor if you ever find yourself feeling that way. Yeah, do something. Don't just be an ideas person. But I digress. Execution truly is everything. And I think that in business, all we see is different interpretations of how to execute in a different way from a
Mm,
competitor. So the ideas are almost just nebulous. They're out there in the world and then they're interpreted and executed on. That's what I think is the beauty of business is really the execution, but also that's the hard work.
mm,
So if you would ask me, I would say a business is 80% execution and 20% the idea. But we could also rephrase that and broaden it to be the vision or the purpose or the
mm.
mission. The soul of the business might be that 20%. And as an ideas man, I feel like there is some nickel or quarter of value to the idea or the vision. So I think that's the spark. So there
Yeah,
is some value, but I have never been the person to say, sign this NDA before I tell you about my new
right.
startup because I want that feedback. I want it to be out there. And I also am very confident that executing is so hard
Mhm.
that you're gonna need my level of
Yep.
passion in order to actually do what I'm thinking about doing. So I'm not worried about telling you. And I'm also not worried necessarily about telling a close competitor what my idea is, because if my idea is so good that it will completely rework their roadmap, that's
Right.
unrealistic. Like, one person is gonna tell you an idea they have with no proof, no traction, no execution, and that's going to change the roadmap
Right.
of an established competitor. very unlikely. And if it did happen, I'm probably okay with it because my chances already were so slim. I don't know. I've never run into that and I don't really believe it would. Does that answer your
Yeah, I
question?
think it does. To you, the reward of sharing your idea is higher than the risk, and
Yeah.
that so much of our businesses are built on things greater than the idea. How then do we think about things in our like business government landscape that are meant to protect ideas? Like so much of IP protection is put into due diligence when you're looking for investment capital. Even the existence of IP at all is something that every business professor that's helping you write a business plan or venture capitalist that's looking to own part of your business is looking for. But if we're agreeing that ideas are basically the 5 cents and the business is everything else, why do we take so much stock in that IP?
Yeah, I think a lot of the protection laws that we have on the books to protect those ideas are more about protecting potentially the consumer and brands. So I don't want to allow for people to sell knockoffs or
Mhm,
fakes or impersonate my brand. But generally, it's totally fine to exchange ideas and compete. And we have the idea of free
mhm,
market. So normally, I would say most of the laws are concentrated on brands so that we can have authentic players in the
right,
marketplace for everyone's benefit. But there are examples of being able to protect your idea,
mhm,
like a
yeah.
patent. That is saying, "This is how I'm approaching this. It's mine. You can't use it." And in the world of software, that's a lot harder, but
Mhm.
in physical products, yeah, it happens, and I think there is some rationale behind it. Is that a good jumping off place for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great transition. So, yeah, I think that what we're getting at is things like patents maybe don't protect ideas as much as they protect the risk. Right? And the risk of the
Right.
work. We're talking about how the idea is very small, business very big, right? In the grand scheme of how things work and influence whether or not we're successful. And I think a lot of times we think of patents as protecting ideas, but really what a patent is designed to do is have some sense of identity between a creator and their plan to execute on an idea and protects them in that gap of I've had the idea and I'm going to execute it from people coming in the ninth inning of when you've just figured it out and it's just working and you're ready to make it a product and just saying, this is, I'm going to copy all the work that you've done and all of the risks that you've taken on to develop this idea and sell it myself. And in general, I think that's how the system is supposed to work. There's a lot that can be said about whether or not it actually works that way. I think we
Yeah.
both have heard stories of things like patent trolls, which are people that will see concepts or ideas that are not patented and patent them and then sue the company that has actually developed the idea but not own the patent, which is crazy. The other way that patent trolls perform their sleazy work is by patenting, wow, that's a horrible word to say, things that don't yet exist but are so generic that are used ubiquitously across an industry or a market, and then suing companies that use that either process or like product, um, which is not how the system is supposed to work. And so we can all agree that those bad actors suck and no one should do that.
Yes. Please do not muddy the legal system in order to commit fraud.
Yeah.
PSA of the
Yes,
day.
exactly. The other thing that I want to get your opinion on though is let's say I'm a company. Let's say I've got a new process for creating some sort of product and I patent that process. And in 20 years or 25 years, I can't remember what the expiration date is, thing comes up. And I and my lovely team of patent lawyers say, hey, with kind of the new information that we've gathered over the past 20 years, we think we can make some slight changes to this patent and repatent it, basically making an extended version of the idea, saying that this is a whole new idea now, that we've done so much research that this thing is completely different, and then resubmitting that and getting another 20, 25 years, 30 years. What do you think about that process? Who is that designed to protect?
Oh, I'm torn. I'm torn on it. You have to make a moral judgment. Am I willing to abuse the rules and not break
Mhm.
them? Or am I not willing to abuse the rules because of a moral standard?
Yep.
Do I hold myself to a standard above the legal requirement, or am I willing to play in the gray area in order to enrich myself or prevent competition? Generally, I like to think, hold yourself to a higher standard, do what's right. If you got a patent, you're getting rewarded for the time and
Mhm.
development. You have a 20-year head start above your competition to establish your brand and your credibility and drive sales. That's
Yeah.
enough. So I would say don't try to play in the gray area of making those little tweaks. But in the real world, you have to play the
Mhm.
game. If you don't, someone else will. So there is that pressure to engage in that legal
Right.
trickery in order to hold on to your artificial
Mhm.
advantage through owning of an IP. Honestly, I'm torn on it. Do you have an equal wrestle in your mind, or is it more cut and dry?
I think, yeah, an equal wrestle in the way that I can see the nuance of why that kind of rule exists and who it is trying to protect, but also seeing that it does usually dramatically affect markets in negative ways and consolidate power in larger players who can even afford to pay the $20,000 or whatever it is to file a patent originally, and then the $100,000 plus in lawyer fees and everything to refile all this stuff. But um, in general, I think the thing you raise is the idea that this is like a moral argument, right? That if
Yeah.
we're working in our best interest, why wouldn't we do this patent extension sort of thing? Um, the thing that I would love to explore with you is what are the selfish reasons for not doing those things, like
Yeah.
to taking the what we would see as a moral high ground, but that moral high ground might actually be helpful. Uh, one of the stories that I want to tease up is to talk about this is the story of SawStop. Do you know who SawStop is?
I'm generally
Okay.
familiar, but go
Yeah, so
ahead.
SawStop, you might have seen their TikToks, is a table saw company. The owner of SawStop developed a way to protect users from the crazy spinning blade of a table saw when it senses like electromagnetic, basically, I think interference, which usually can come from your finger through the blade. Everything is metal, and then the sensor at the bottom gets triggered, and the saw immediately stops, haha, hence the name, and shoves itself down into the table saw, and it breaks the table saw for a little bit. It's repairable, but it uses so much force that they're designed to break. But they're so super safe. You can watch these like amazing videos of people putting hot dogs or even their fingers accidentally on the blade, and what would have been like chopping your finger off and potentially taking your whole hand with it is now just a little prick. So this guy develops this technology and says, "Oh my god, this is the future. And no longer will people on job sites be or in workshops be at risk of losing life and limb. I'm going to go to all the companies and say, hey, I've got this cool technology and I'd like to sell it to you." He gets a patent for the work so he can develop a prototype, goes to all the companies, says, hey, you should buy this safety thing. And all the companies say no. And they say no because if they're not required to pay for it, it's just gonna cost them more money. Even if it allows them to say that our saws are super safe and blah, 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 like, they don't think the consumer actually cares about that, they care about they're fine keeping the status quo of it being a dangerous machine, but with normal safety precautions of don't touch the blade, and if they buy it and their competitor doesn't buy it, then their saw is just more expensive, and so the, founder of SawStop is so
And
sorry, go for it.
they were wanting to sell a license to
Yes,
use
to
this
use the
technology,
technology.
and then that cost would be passed on to the
Exactly.
customer, and these brands didn't wanna raise their prices.
Exactly, and the founder of SawStop says, "Wow, that's super disappointing. I guess I have to start a company." And he starts
Forced his
yes, and he
hand.
starts SawStop as a way of utilizing this technology, showcasing it in the marketplace, and showing that consumers really have a want for this. And the entire time, they're talking to the US government about, hey, you should require this should be a regulatory decision that all table saws should be required to have this type of safety technology. Whether it's ours or not doesn't matter, but table saws should be safer. And a lot of people were saying that they were having all these discussions because it would be better for their business. But if you look at the lineage of the story, that was the whole motivation basically to start the company. Not the whole one, but an influential motivation. So flash forward to, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, the government actually did regulate that job site saws and other large table saws need some sort of safety technology that stops the blade when it detects human flesh. And as part of that, SawStop in goodwill publicized their patent. So they got rid of their ownership over the idea and patented technology of how to implement this in a table saw and gave it to the public, gave it to the US government. And so now any company, in order to comply with this regulation, can utilize SawStop's technology for no license, and we all get to live in a world where table saws are a little bit more safe. I tease up this story to talk about how you could say that the founder of SawStop was just morally good. They just had some sense of righteousness that they wanted this to exist and they fought like an activist does in order to make this happen. What I would say is that in some ways, this was in SawStop's best interest to do this for a couple reasons that I'll list out, and then I want to get your feedback on all this, Henry. The first is that it ties together a reason for you to work with a community, whether that's your competition or regulatory bodies, in order to do something bigger, right? Go further, faster, cheaper with the innovations that can all happen from a community because now this thing exists as a standard part of the marketplace. So no longer do we have to all innovate on safety technology. We can innovate on way cooler things with job site table saws. That's number one. Second one is that SawStop didn't wrap up its identity. The founder didn't wrap up like their identity with their idea. So when they started this company, it wasn't this idea or this concept that their idea is the be all end all. And if the idea doesn't work, then my business doesn't work and I suck and all that stuff. They thought of themselves as almost a steward of this idea that, oh my gosh, I've figured this thing out and now I want to gift it to the world. And in that way, they have removed the pressure that if the idea doesn't, that they're not smart or good enough, which is something that I know founders experience all the time. The last reason that I think it's not selfish for the founder of SawStop to have had this long lineage of working on this problem is the legacy that they're going to have, right? The legacy of having made a dramatic shift in a market in a positive way more than most other companies would like dream of. Volvo did this with the development of the seat belt, and you can't really think of anything else off the top of your mind that's as similar. Like that company is going to have a long positive legacy for being a dominant force that shifted a market, not as a monopoly bullying everyone else, but as a company that's standing up for something that they believe in and believe should be ubiquitous in an industry. Are any of those things, Henry, interesting to you? Are any of those inspiring at all as someone trying to explore this idea of how do we get founders to maybe think more about being stewards an idea rather than owning an idea? Is anything resonating there?
Yeah, I think we're talking about protecting ideas. Should you do it? Is even attempting to do it pursuing your
Mhm.
goals or not? I think the ideas it brings to my mind are, I think you talk about sharing an idea rather than protecting that idea. I think everyone knows that eventually these ideas disseminate out into the world and are
Yep.
replicated. In order to control an idea is
Futile.
temporary at best,
Yeah.
right? So I think that it's good to share those ideas, but it's also inevitable.
Mhm.
So, like, should you even make a moral stance on the
Mhm.
idea? Maybe not. But yeah, we see this all the time in the marketplace. In electric vehicles, the standardization of charging
Yeah.
port. That's an example where a company develops a good way of doing it. I believe
Mhm.
Tesla, and then everybody can use
Mhm.
that so that everyone doesn't have to create their own and innovate in that area. We can all build off the same foundation, which is
Yep.
progress. I really liked your rationale behind having the legacy.
Mhm.
I think as the little guy, you're a founder, you want to be a disruptor. What's the best way you can evoke the most change? If you can get the big guys to amplify your idea, not
Right?
bad, not bad. If you can also profit off that, excellent. I feel like how can you tie those 2
Mhm.
together? And I think SawStop is a good example, but it did require them to go into
Yeah.
business
Totally.
and run a
It
for-profit
required
company.
them to patent the
Yeah.
technology. Like, in so many ways, we're
Yeah.
talking about the idea of protecting and owning an idea versus, like, how do you think about it as, "I'm a steward of an idea, and I have a responsibility to make sure that I shape this thing." I don't think they're always mutually exclusive. Like, I think the fact
Mhm.
that the SawStop founder patented the technology and used that patent in order to get it to the point and build enough market pressure and build enough governmental pressure to make a shift in the development of these products is, like, a testament to the system. Like, this person was a good steward of the idea by patenting it. A lot of people in, like, open source communities, like, I'm a big part of the, like, 3D printing community and, like, the open source software movement, and there's always such resistance to patents and ownership. Everything should be open source, all that stuff, which partially I vibe with. But there's some things that I think work well in our system that we shouldn't completely negate, and I think the SawStop story is one. Now, you could say that the existence of this type of idea ownership is what also creates the opportunity for the bad actors we've talked about. So you can imagine someone not as morally kind and upstanding patents the SawStop technology and perpetually keeps the patent over time and is the only player that is allowed to provide this type of safety to customers. And completely monopolizes that market. So I could see both sides, but in general, I think it's a phenomenal story of someone doing something insane with very little resources, and that makes a big impact. I think that's like an important model to show for a lot of founders.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think my kind of closing thoughts on the topic are if you have an idea that it's going to advance society, broadly
Hmm.
speaking, there is no real benefit to protecting that. We do have the case of like biotech and medicine where it's incredibly expensive to develop these
Yep.
ideas. And I think our current system is okay at compensating the developers of that medicine and those
I
treatments.
think it's more than okay.
It could be better. It could be better for the people maybe, but I think as a founder, if you're not in that specific niche, like obviously the technology of the car, we
Hmm.
wouldn't want to patent that and say, "Oh, we don't want competition there because one one firm created that idea, so they should have the sole ownership of it." Obviously not. No one would hold that standard. We want to share ideas, but more importantly, as a founder, if you are controlling of your solution, you are rejecting outside
Hmm.
input, you're rejecting diversity of thought, and you're actually harming yourself and harming the idea by isolating
Yeah.
it. So I really like the idea of being able to be transparent with your solution in order to not only invite competition to make you better, but also invite help,
Yeah.
right? So like with open core
Hmm.
or open source software development, you're able to get a lot more people who might be interested in this to help you advance it, which I think in the long run, in some industries, is super
Totally.
beneficial. And you're going to make a lot of money off of that.
You're
Like,
gonna make a lot
I
of
think
money
about
off of those free development hours.
exploit them, right? Yeah. I, I personally feel like the uniqueness of your idea, especially in the world of technology, is a real minimal factor on whether or not you're going to be successful in the market. I think branding,
Totally.
distribution, trust, authority. That's what's gonna make a difference. And so keep the core fairly transparent, and you want to improve it. So why would you protect it and really make it worse by hiding it in a cave that nobody can touch?
Totally. And two, those things that also improve your business. One of them is confidence. Henry, how do you deal with self-doubt? I've been this week in particular, I'm writing a book about entrepreneurship and kind of all these wackadoo radical ways of thinking about it differently that we talk about on this podcast. And in that process, which I think is the largest undertaking I've ever done, I've been feeling a lot of doubt in my own intelligence and whether or not people care about what I'm saying or interested even at all. And it's very reminiscent to me of last episode. We were talking a lot about burnout and kind of these feelings of does anything I work on actually matter? Have you ever felt that way? How do you deal with these feelings?
Of course, man. All the time, it's very isolating when you're working on a project by yourself and you're not getting the positive feedback. I can only imagine working on something that's creative and long form like a book. You don't really want to you don't want to tell people about it until it's finished. And so it can be lonely to build that, and I think definitely self-doubt creeps in. I've been thinking a lot and admiring leaders in business that can keep a team motivated for long-term
Mm,
projects. I just find that to be an absolute superpower, whether you're individual working on a project or on a team or managing a team. I just think that is really
yeah.
challenging because initially you have the hype and enthusiasm. I'm writing a book, I'm building a business,
Hmm.
I'm designing a car. But those are multi-month at best, multi-year
Right.
projects, and it just 6 months in, how are you gonna stay excited enough and confident enough to see it through? I really view it as a superpower. I don't wanna cut to the chase, but to really get into the meat of it, some people got it, some people
Hmm.
don't. I don't know if there's really some best practices on how do you stay in the thick of it and push through a long-term project happily and
Yeah.
healthily. I just think it's hard, it's a struggle, and I feel the pain, but I don't know if there's a cure to this
Yeah,
pain
exactly.
necessarily.
One of the things that I've been thinking about is that I honestly feel like I was better about ignoring doubt, I'd say, not so much dealing with self-doubt, but ignoring it when I was younger. Like, I think particularly in the first 2 years of running Lumastic, the company that I ran out of college, I I think was so myopic, and that helped me so much in thinking that just this has to work, right? I just am exuding this optimism that I've got what it takes. I can handle the downs. I can deal with all of these problems that arise and things that I don't know about. You just have this almost blind confidence in yourself. And
And why not
yeah,
me?
and why
You know,
not
I've
me and all
other
this
people
stuff.
do this, why not me?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
now as I think I've got older, I feel like I'm on almost the other side of what people call the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect being like if you think of a graph of what you actually know and what you think you know, right? Actually know can be very low, think you know can be very high, right? And like these over time, as you learn stuff, you realize that you're not as smart as you thought you were. I think particularly doing research for this book has made me feel that way, where there's so much information and so many things that people have thought about that are, you know, assenting or dissenting, like things that I'm talking about. And these people have more credentials and all that stuff. And so, am I contributing anything? Is like a big feeling that constantly crosses my mind. And I think that's so similar to how probably a lot of older or like second time founders might also feel is you now know how hard it's going to be. You know what the ups and downs feel like. And in some ways, that provides you with a sense of solace when it's happening, but it also provides you with a lot of doubt before you start or while you're in it that it's ever going to work out.
And I would say dread.
Dread. Yeah.
Like Starting a new podcast. Oh my gosh. The first one took a year to get off the ground. I don't know if I wanna go through that
Here
again.
you are, Henry.
Like that and here I am. But that's a real feeling,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Of like, now that I know more, I know the bad stuff.
Exactly, and I know how it
So,
felt.
how do you
I know how it
persist?
felt to
Yeah,
fail, and I don't wanna feel that again, and so I'd
yeah.
rather just, in some ways, quit. I wrote in my, like, personal newsletter, the one that I send to the 30 plus people that are helping me with the early versions of this book, that's the place that I feel like I'm smashed between, like, if this works or if this doesn't work, then it's all been for naught. And I know the statistics that it's probably not gonna work. And also, if it does work, I'm almost gonna feel like I don't deserve it. That there's no way that I'm smart enough or anything. So it has to be a fluke for that to happen. Right? It's like the likely probability is that it doesn't work out. So if it does work out, it's probably just random luck, right? And I'm going to be found out as a fake and a fraud and all that stuff. And you get sandwiched between these two, like rocks in a hard place, until you just decide that I'm just going to quit as a way of escaping. And obviously, that's not what I plan on doing. And that's not what I would invite any sort of entrepreneur or creative person working on a long term project that takes a lot of time and energy to do. But it is a hard feeling to deal with. I called you, or you called me, or whatever, after I sent this email earlier this week. And you said something to me that was extremely helpful, which was, it feels like this type of feeling is one of the ones that you just have to distract yourself from. Can you talk to me more about that?
Yeah, for me, it comes back to confidence is a superpower, and once you start asking yourself, "Why not me?" and that transitions to, "Why?" That's
Yep.
dangerous. Like, that's gonna stop you. That's an obstacle in your way that you really need to push past. I struggle with this. I think everyone that's doing anything purposeful struggles with
Yep.
this, right? Because the self-doubt is a legitimate thing and the odds are against you. If we talk huge picture, the statistics that we're even here right now are infinitely small,
Yep.
right? Don't look at the odds. Like Han Solo, never tell me the odds. Um, when I was young, I was in the Boy Scouts and I had some drive to go into leadership of my
Mm,
troop. Could be for X number of reasons, but I the oldest? No. Was I the smartest? Was I the strongest? I didn't have any elite traits that would inherently make me a qualified leader. However, when I was put into that position, I became because it was now my job to
yep.
organize, to educate, to inspire others. So when I was elected the senior patrol leader of my troop, was I the best cook or fire starter or rope tire? Not necessarily, but because I was in that position where I had to teach people how to tie ropes, I taught myself and I became better. And so I think by putting yourself in a position where you're giving yourself some authority, I'm the founder,
Mhm.
I'm a writer, I'm an
Yep.
author, you are inviting self-doubt, but you're also inviting the ability for you to get better.
Yeah.
So when I hear you say, "If I do make it and I beat the odds, I'm gonna feel like a fraud." No, you will rise to the occasion and be the person that you want people to think that you are. I think that's the reality that I've experienced. That's what I tried to believe, but at the end of the day, it's just a belief. It's like there isn't this like magic
You can't
potion that
know.
can tell you, "Oh, yeah, it's not logical."
Mhm.
It really isn't. You have to reject the logic
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
odds.
I think what's so resonant is there's a section in the book right now that's titled "Fake It Till You Make It," which is all about
Mhm.
how this mantra in startup culture has been used in the past to do exactly what you're saying, to get you to the point where you just blindly believe that you'll figure it out, which is the thing that you almost need to feel so that you can reject the idea of, if I have success, I'll be a fraud and I'm likely to fail. Like that, you just have to switch your brain on to believe that. And I think when you're talking about this idea, some people got it, some people don't. I think that a lot of people are trained to have that skill of blocking that doubt more than others, and that's what inevitably leads to entrepreneurship. The flip What's been hard to internalize that is that entire chapter is about how that phrase has gotten co-opted into becoming a almost rallying cry and a sense of permission for kind of grifters and people that have no idea what they're doing, starting these like big companies with big plans and telling people that their product is going to do all this stuff when it's not. Like that culture of fake it till you make it has almost become a culture of lying, like permission to lie. And so it's been hard for me to realize again the positive parts of that phrase that I tease up in the early version of the chapter, but almost forgotten what it's like to internalize it. And so, in some ways, I'm really grateful that this week I've been feeling like this so that I can remember why we invented this mantra, much like a religion. Like, why do we invent these creeds and these things we believe in order to remember institutionally this is how we have to do it? But thank you, Henry.
And
Oh, you go.
in my view, the reason you have to tell yourself that lie is because if you don't, you won't do anything.
Exactly.
Like, it's crippling to believe anything
Yeah.
otherwise. Another last analogy for you that you might
Please,
like
we didn't
is
have enough analogies.
all right, here's one more for you. Elect yourself president.
Hmm.
Surround yourself with a cabinet,
Right.
right? Surround yourself with the best people that you can. But at the end of the day, you've never been in the situation room.
Mhm.
You don't know how to juggle these decisions. You've never done it. You're a fraud,
Mm.
but you're in the seat
Yeah.
and you're expected to do it and tap into the resources around you to help you. But that is a good place for you to be. You want to evoke change. You want to deliver your message. You want to make the country
Yeah.
better. You want to make your life
It's the
better.
thing you ran for,
Surround
right?
yourself
It's
with
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In this case, you're electing yourself, and you don't have to convince anybody.
Country of
But
one.
if you look at yourself as El Presidente, yeah, it's not like you took a test. It's not like there were qualifiers that were like, hey, so as a part of this job, if there's a nuclear attack, you're going to have 6 minutes to decide how and if we retaliate with a nuclear force. Have you ever done that before? What's your qualifications? You don't have any.
Mm,
When you can't predict what's going to happen, if the book comes out or if a business takes off. And so be the president in that you have a vision, you have an ethical standard, you have some goals, but more importantly, surround yourself with good people and do your best. You're going to figure it
yeah.
out.
In response to my
That's
email,
how I do.
my wife sent me a message that was that I'm forgetting in the situation where maybe everything works out that I will have been a person that made it work out. I'm not me now that might feel like I don't know anything and all that stuff. I will be the person in that future that might know more, that might deserve that success.
Yep.
And so that's an important thing to think about. So thank you to everyone that might be listening that responded to that message with me being very vulnerable. Pat on the back to me. And thank you particularly to you, Henry. You're like a good
Of
friend,
course.
very helpful. Now let's help you. You, sir,
I
are
need
about
it.
to launch a new company, new product, test something out. And like all founders, are dealing with the difficult problem of you're an unknown entity, unknown brand, you're an unknown person in some ways. How do you get people to trust your goddamn website and sign up for your thing?
Yeah. Trust and authority. I think we've talked in the past about fake it till you make
Mhm.
it, make yourself appear bigger than you really are.
These
This
are the
can come in
perversive
the
parts of what I was talking about before, the like lies of
yeah.
legitimacy. Like, how do I lie in a seemingly micro way in order to make myself seem legitimate to customers? Which is obviously a slippery slope that we can talk about in some other episode. But yeah, like that was a very popular thing 10 years ago. But like, how are you approaching this now?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. It's a new venture. It's fragile. You wanna present it in the best possible way while still being authentic. I think the challenge that I'm putting on myself is how can you make a new company appear legitimate, but also
Mm,
authentic and relatable and personable. A mentor of mine reminded me that people don't buy from robots.
mhm,
People buy from
right.
people. And so how can I put myself in the forefront of the business without making it the Henry show? That's the
Yeah, how do you
struggle. So
humanize a brand? Like, yeah.
exactly.
Just to
Yeah.
tease up a little story about what we're talking about in terms of making yourself appear bigger than you are, being very popular. I think it was in The 4 Hour Work Week, which I read when I was in high school. And there was a chapter about how to do exactly that. Make email aliases, use the internet to make it seem like more people work at your company than do, as a way of like appealing to customers who wouldn't trust someone just randomly posting something from their laptop in their basement. And I did this with my early website agency, and I got in a big fight with my father around whether or not this was completely dishonest and morally corrupt and whether I'm becoming a horrible person. And I laugh about it now. It was an intense time, but it did make me think a lot about that idea. And in some ways, I'm so grateful because it's inspired the kind of like story of a chapter in the book where I'm discussing the kind of these lies of legitimacy and whether or not you need them at all. And I think based on the fact that this is no longer popular, like you're talking about, like the popular thing is to seem authentic and human. And like we're tired of these faceless corporate robot entities selling us stuff, that it's an asset to be a small operation online. It's refreshing to people. And in terms of how you do that, which I know a lot of founders are struggling with, I think a lot of it comes down to I'm a writer, so I always think everything comes down to copy. But I do. I think when you have a well written landing page that sounds like a human person talking to you instead of a lot of buzzwords and jargon about all these things that your product will do for somebody else, it comes across more human because it seems conversational. Then the other thing that I think you're getting at about like how do I do this is you're a one person show. Do you slap yourself on the website and be like, this is made by Henry as a way of like strictly, explicitly humanizing the brand as this product might be a product, but it's a product made by a person. And I think it's a hard line to ride, but I do think you're in the right direction.
Yeah, I think my current approach is try to make things as professional as
Hmm.
possible. So we're not trying to be scrappy and put together something in Notion or something and throwing that
Yep.
up for everybody to take a look at. So try to give it the best storefront possible while doing my best to build in public.
Hmm.
So attaching my face to it, at least professionally. And then, more importantly, for the customers or the users in my case, be accessible,
Mm.
right? So my company email, henry@repbot.io, is publicly
Right.
accessible.
That's
You
the
can book a
contact.
call
Yeah.
with me on the website. That is the line that I'm surfing on right now. I think that it is decent. What I'm afraid of is my mentor said people don't buy from robots, except I'm building something called RepBot, and it's a little bit tricky. I think self-serve software is so popular, right? When I buy something from Amazon, I do not care about anyone that works at Amazon. I don't care about anybody's credibility. I just want something that works and that's fast and reliable and cheap and all these other
Yeah.
things. I really have to prove the hypothesis in my business case that marketers will interact with a bot in order to start the purchase process or start the sponsorship
Yeah.
process with a creator. That feels like a big hurdle if I know that people don't buy from robots. Do you think people sometimes buy from robots, or do I need to really personalize this rep bot thing, or it's doomed to fail?
I think that people do buy from robots. I think that we take we put a lot of stock as entrepreneurs in our name and our logo and like all these things that we think are the identity representing us. And in so many ways they are. But in so many ways, those brands get created by the interactions that you personally, as the founder, have with your customers and the way that you relate to them and the way that you work with them. And the brand will become representative to somebody of those types of relationships, which starts, like as I'm beating the dead horse here, with the copy on your homepage and goes all the way down to the about section where it's, yeah, exactly. You're not sending a contact form to a random person. Like, this is my actual email. Like, I want to talk to you. I think that's going to go a long way. And time will tell. You'll be able to report back to us maybe in a couple weeks how it's going, what the feedback you're getting from people is. I think you're also in a beneficial ecosystem where most people that you're working with, either on the creator side or on the marketer side, are pretty tech literate. And so, like, that helps. But we shall see how it goes, Henry.
Yes. An exciting time for
An
sure.
exciting time for sure. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this episode. As always, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, leave a comment with any of your questions, thoughts, concerns about this episode or any other, and we will see you next time.